I want to start with this sort of theme that, in 2025, we have a lot of TV shows for kids, right? And parents have to think once, I guess, or twice before choosing the perfect title for their children. So I wanted to ask you what makes Shape Island stand out, from other shows like that.
I mean, I can only say, like, speak to what we try to do, and John and I, we spend most of our time in the world of books. We write and illustrate books, and both with our books and I think with Shape Island too. I mean, we want to make great storytelling, real literature for kids. We want to ask big questions. We want to make the best jokes possible. We think that kids are not, just an audience to be babysat by 22 minutes of television, or that, story is just a way to pass the time before bedtime. We think that children are the best, most sophisticated, most interesting audience to tell stories for. We think that they have deep, huge questions about the world, and that gives us license to make stories that are befitting their intelligence and their curiosity. So yeah, I think that we take big swings with Shape Island, and we hope our audience responds to it in kind.
That thing about questions too is important. I think it was something that we sort of have learned. An episode or a book can be complete when it just made it its job to raise a question without necessarily answering it. If you have clarified, brought, into being a question that wasn't necessarily put that way, and the characters don't even quite know how to answer it, but they've considered it very carefully at the end. We were really satisfied with that and actually very proud to leave something there. And I think a lot of stuff for kids attempts to bring up questions that have answers already built into them, and that makes an episode or it feels like an ending. But very often with Shape Island and with our books pretty often too, you're left with questions, but not hopefully unsatisfyingly so.
I wanted to sort of build on that. First of all, today we have such a much higher social awareness of, how TV shows and books should teach children certain things. And I know you have a lot of experience, but I'm curious how do you learn and then know what children want and what they should get from, a show like Shape Island?
Like there's plenty of that for kids already. We kind of like to meet them where they're at that day. I think that we don't really believe that kids should be viewed always as potential people. They are people that day. And what can we show them? What can we tell them? What can we use what they know today to tell them a great story? And without being like, someday you'll be good enough to get this, or what we're trying to do here is make you better for half an hour.
Yeah, we're not trying to mold you into some perfect citizen in 10 years. We are talking to the real living, breathing person in front of us right now who is having deep emotions and big questions. It's not about creating this better person in a year, in 2 years, or even at the end of 11 minutes. We want to create this like soul nourishing story that is the thing that kid needs right then. I think that, it involves like maybe coming to it with some humility too. I don't think that stories are just like these missives from the great wise world of adulthood that are going to mold a kid or be inscribed on a child's brain. I do think that you learn things from stories, but the things that you learn, the potential that we have is that like we can get to the very core of what it means to be a person. We can get to places that you can only get to with stories. You can't reduce it down to just a lesson that says, be kind or share with others. We want to get like 3 levels below that to like the complexity of life. And you can only get to these places with stories. It's incredible, like what you can get to in 11 minutes. We wouldn't be satisfied to just have something that's reduced down to a simple 1-sentence lesson. We want to get to the deep questions of life, and then also have triangle falling over all the time.
Yeah.
So tell me more. What can we expect from the new season? How does it sort of differ, from the previous one?
I think we had gotten more comfortable. The whole crew seemed to have. I think the first season has a lot of energy in it because there was so much discovery of the world and the characters and what could be done. And it was a very different show right away from anything that the crew had worked on or that we had worked on. And so there was a lot to be learned. And the second one feels, I think, the second season, these episodes feel more at ease with the tools that we had and like who we had in the characters and the place. And there's whole episodes that are more sort of concept driven because we just felt like having fun. We weren't quite as nervous about, can we pull this off? We had liked the first season a lot. And so we didn't have that to prove anymore. I think that this second season feels comfortable in its skin. What do you think so, Mac?
Yeah, I do. I think we've got, we really had fun taking our characters we know so well and putting them in some sort of like stranger episodes. I think
Yeah.
that, we have an episode where we love this idea for stop motion, but where Triangle, one of our characters, just stands still for 11 minutes. He makes a bet that he can stand still for 11 minutes. And we're like, this is just gonna be so great. One of our stop motion characters doesn't move. We thought of it as this great gift we were giving to our animation studio. But then of course, by standing still, he ends up transcending space and time and going on a wild sensory journey through the garden. And it ended up being a very hard episode to animate.
Every time we start with that, where we're like, we're going to give them a gift of production somehow, it ended up being way more ambitious and
being like, why are they so mad at us? Oh, oh, there's a giant chicken who's yelling at our characters. Right, that's right. Yeah.
Talking about the challenges, was there anything you have found sort of challenging? For instance, any story you didn't know how to approach, for example?
Story, I think, came fairly easily because it's a different approach with this show than I think some stories where it wasn't about plot necessarily. What you had was three, by now, fairly well-defined characters. And what you do is you just give those three characters like a beach ball and you just see what happens because something's going to happen. And there was a real pleasure in that to be like, we know what each of them would do now. And so let's just see what happens and just kind of follow our noses with them, telling us what to do. The writing of it was so much fun that way. And we had such a great writing team who also knew how to do that in ways that we couldn't have ever done. Follow that up with how the animators see that playing out beat by beat. It was just such a great trust fall to an extremely strong team. Yeah, we had a great time.
I was also thinking for people who don't know anything about your craft, right? Like, what is your approach when you guys are working together? I mean, how do you share those sort of creative responsibilities related to the show?
I mean, I think that, in a lot of ways, making the show was just an extension, a long creative partnership that goes back now at this point. When did we start working together, John? 2008?
Yeah, a long time ago.
I think that John and I have a pretty similar set of values when it comes to storytelling, and we like stories that work the same way. There are places where our tastes differ a little bit, but I think that like things that I do that are a little that John wouldn't do, and the things that John does that I wouldn't do, I think we have like an appreciation for that voice in the other person, and like that we can make something that incorporates both those moves. And then we have these very different areas of interest, and we're really excited to just like have John go off and oversee a certain part of a story, or in this case, a show, and then I'm hanging out in a different area of the show or the story, looking after those things.
Yeah, by now we've worked together for so long that we can kind of trust each other to go off in different directions, but then come back around at the end. And we've both taken care of our areas of interest. And the overlap there, whether those two jobs or two results will merge, isn't really a question anymore. We sort of know that and we can trust that. And so I can go off and obsess about the shape of a leaf, and Matt can go off and obsess about a particular dialogue exchange. And we can kind of trust that those two things are going to somehow talk to each other properly at the end. And it's a really great exercise. It just seems to prove itself over and over again that we think it works.
Again, I wanted to build on that, and I don't want it to sound quite silly, but you mentioned that you've been working together for like, almost 20 years. Like, do you still find it exciting? I guess yes, but how do you still, learn from each other? do you learn from each other?
I learned so much from Jon. There is nobody in the world who has influenced storytelling and just probably my life than Jon. We figured out how to make these things together. And we've learned a lot alongside each other, but I have learned so much from Jon's approach to the world. He has affected the way that I write, that I tell stories. He has affected the way that like I see nature and buildings and clothing.
Just yesterday, I had like a jacket, and I was like, "Why did I buy this jacket?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, because I thought Mac would like it."
That is so funny. I was saying to somebody, who was I talking to? I was talking to somebody about clothes, a good friend of mine, and I was like, I dress for Jon every day, even when he's not going to see the outfit that I'm wearing. He is my audience.
I think that when you work creatively in this kind of work, I think that what holds your these tentpole people that you're thinking of when you're making stuff, because it's hard to think of children when you're making things for children, because like you have your own children. What we do now, we didn't when we started doing this work. It's surprising how few people, and they're usually adults, that you're thinking of getting a laugh out of, or getting a rise out of, or making emotional, or just impressing in a very general way. Mac is like the big one. He's like, what would Mac think of this? And you're not even consciously doing that. You're just like, it's in the mix as far as what you hope and think. And by now, kind of know he's going to do to something when you make it. But also, I work for myself sometimes. I write and illustrate stuff in a lonely sort of solo way. And the job there is very much like the job with him and I too, is that you're constantly in the business of keeping yourself interested. And that usually means putting yourself into the deep end as over and over again. And this show was certainly the deep end for us. We'd never done something like this. And so putting that machinery in a new circumstance to find out what it does. We were very pleasantly surprised that a lot of the decision-making sort of that we do for books and writing applied here. It applied to television, and it applied to how things are shot, or what the light looks like, or how characters move across a screen. Those decisions were informed by the same things that, talk to us about writing books. It was a really hopeful thing to find out.
At the end of the day, what makes this job for you most gratifying? I mean, is it the moment when those episodes are finally out, or maybe it's the feedback? Did you think about it?
I think that when you see all the pieces working together, there are so many components of these things, and you go about, the production of these things, choosing when you're able to, or in conjunction with others, all these disparate parts, right? Animators and voices for them, and writing and sets and all that stuff. As much fun as books are, when a little guy walks out of his little house and says something with his little voice, and all those things were chosen at separate times, but the whole thing just works, and he's sitting there blinking, having walked out of his house. It's very dangerously addictive, that moment, because like now you just want to do that. And it's so much work to get it there. But it is like incredible to have that little thing just have its little heart beating like that.
I do love the moments when all right, so there are two moments. There's one that Jon is talking about where like the thing works, right? Where you like hit the bell and the sound is right, and you're like, I made a bell that works, and that is deeply satisfying. When somebody else hears that bell, when you share the thing, when kids are out there having Shape Island birthday parties, or like somebody comes up to you in a signing line and the family says like, oh, this joke from this episode is just become like, we just use that line in our house. Like it is like that's just something that we say when something goes wrong. When you become just like a family's vernacular, when you become some way that family has used to like relate to each other and make sense of the world, that is a profoundly satisfying feeling.
Thank you guys so much. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank
you so much. These were very great questions. Yeah,
thank you.